Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to the next episode, the next podcast of What Else Is New with Tim Graves. I want to thank you guys for listening to these podcasts. I hope you guys are enjoying these and the ones that Todd, myself, and some of my staff are doing. I hope you guys are getting some out of these, and maybe you're listening to these when you're hitting some balls, putting some headphones on. I mean, that's typically what I like to do. I like to, if I'm out, sometimes I'll go out and play a little practice round or go hit some balls in the range or go putt a little bit in the green. And I'll throw my earphones on and my earbuds and listen to sometimes music, sometimes podcasts, sometimes, I listen to some motivational speakers and different things. And, I enjoy that. And it tends to put me in my own world. So maybe you're using these for that or maybe something like that. And I hope you're getting some out of this. But anyway, today's podcast, I want to talk a little bit about some winter training or, some things you guys can do, in the fall and in the winter and things that we like to set up at Graves Golf to help you all with that. And, the reason I bring this up is a couple of reasons. Number one is last couple of webinars I've done, I made a comment, and I had a lot of people that had made comments about my comment or had actually come back and said some things about my comment. And I thought it was interesting because I don't think they really understood or understand the strength or how much better you can get by focusing on certain areas. I'll tell you what I mean by that. I think it was 2 webinars ago, I came up and I wasn't talking obviously in front of thousands of people, and we played those webinars. We get in front of tens of thousands of people, but I made this comment. I said, if all you worked on were these 3 things, I said, if you worked on your short game, you worked on your mental game, and you worked on your flexibility and fitness, you could cut your handicap in half and actually significantly more than that and very, very, very fast. And I said, the improvement would just shock you. And I said that, and I had quite a few people come back to me and said, explain what you mean by that. And because to them, that sounded like I said, you're blowing off the full swing, or you're not, forget the full swing. And that's exactly the opposite of what I said. And I tell you what I mean by that. So let's break those 3 things down when I said that. And I'm actually going to throw this into some winter training because this is stuff that we can do over the winter. Now, I know a lot of you out there will sit there and say, well, I never get into winter training because, I live in Florida, I live in in Southern California, I live or I travel in the winter and play a lot of golf in the winter. So how am I going to get into winter training? Well, first things first, all good golfers have some form of off-season training, or you can call winter training, or you can call whatever you want. Meaning there's a certain time of the year. They don't put the clubs up. They may practice a little bit. They may even play a little bit, but they take some time to work and really focus on some areas of their game that will be uncomfortable. So it actually could cause their score to possibly go up a little bit. Because here's the issue with golf, the game of golf. Everybody thinks that the game of golf is, you go from, like a 65, or you go from like shooting like a 85 to an 84 to an 83 and 82, and you start going down, or your handicap starts dropping, and it starts going like a straight line, linear, down, over time. It's not the way it happens. When you actually truly see improvement in golf, what you see is it's actually a peaks and valleys. That's what we call it, peaks and valleys. And what happens is you'll get a person or a gal or a guy who comes in and says, okay, I really want to start working on my game. And you'll sit there and you'll literally evaluate where they're at. And you'll evaluate it by, you may look at their swing, you may look at their short game, you may do, score evaluation, you may do handicap evaluation. You're going to do some type of evaluation with them to see what level they're at now. So let's say you have a golfer that came in and he shoots, 88. Let's just pull a number out of the hat. Shoots 88. And he shot between, 85 and 90 for the past couple of years. And he wants to get better. So you take that individual and you say, okay, let's start working on, your swing. You're taking the club too far inside. Your club face is closed. You're working on your grip, whatever you're working on the swing. Okay. And then you may even start working on something with their short game. Maybe they de-accelerate the putter. Maybe their putter face is closed in, whatever it is. I'm just throwing stuff out at random. Well, here's what happens. For a period of time, that individual is going to be making changes in his or her swing or his or her short game. And when they're making changes, they're going to become uncomfortable. Okay. So if that individual is still playing golf at the time and still keeping score, being uncomfortable is going to raise those scores. So it may go from being like shooting an average of an 88 to maybe a 90, 91, 92. I mean, it's not going to be shooting in the hundreds and you can't play golf now, but they start going up a little bit. Okay. So we call it the peaks and valleys. Your scores start going up a little bit. So if you think of a bar graph, with scores versus time, it's not linear going down. It may go up a little bit for a while. And then all of a sudden that golfer, he or she starts figuring things out and it becomes now more comfortable. So that movement we've created for them has become more of a subconscious movement now, something that's normally in their swing or their short game, whatever you do, something that's not unusual and doesn't feel weird when they're in the golf course. And now the scores start coming down. So now they pass through that shooting 88, and they may go to an 87, 86, 85, whatever it is, until now that new move, that new fundamental takes hold, becomes a subconscious movement, okay, which is now normal. And now they're shooting 85s and 84s instead of those 88s. So they've decreased their scores. They've improved their handicap. So it's going to go up before it goes down, okay? Because you've got to get to the uncomfortable stage. Well, golfers and good golfers, or hopefully most golfers, know this, okay? Well, good golfers definitely know this. I don't care if you're a professional. I don't care if you're a top amateur. I don't care if you're just a good amateur. They know this. They know there's peaks and valleys. So what they try to do is they try to have, when their scores are going up or when the not so great golf is going on, they try to do this in somewhat of an off season. Maybe when they're not playing as much. And obviously for professionals, they're not playing as many tournaments, or there's not as much tournaments going on, or there's not as many scores aren't as important. For the average golfer, that's typically over the winter. And I'll tell you why. Because in the winter, we have less time to play golf. It gets dark at 5 o'clock or 5:30 out. Football games are on TV on the weekend and people want to watch the football games. It starts getting cool outside. It's not perfect. It's not great conditions out. We just play less golf. In fact, some people put the clubs up in the closet. Some people don't play golf at all for a few months over the winter. It's just, there's less golf through the winter. So what we try to do at Graves Golf is it's typically the best time of year or best time for us to set up what we call winter training, or you can call it off-season training. And here's what I really want you guys to focus on, or something to think about in off-season training, okay? It's just three major areas, but you can add a fourth when you add the flexibility fitness. This is why I made that comment. Number one is I strongly suggest in off-season training is do mental game work, okay? Now, it may be something as simple as picking up a book and reading it and saying, okay, I want to read about things I can do to help my golf game, mentally help my golf game. Because remember what even the best players in the world will say, the game is 90% mental and the other 10% is mental. We've heard this many, many times. But do something in the off season that helps your mental game. Maybe you read a book like The Talent Code. Maybe do some Zen training. There's a lot of different things you can do. And you can even practice this over the winter. It's interesting, but we always talk, one of the big mental game things we do when we talk about practicing is developing a pre-shot, an in-shot, and a post-shot routine. In fact, we'll call it the red zone, green zone, gray zone. The red zone is the pre-shot routine, getting ready for the shot. The green zone is the in-shot routine. What do you think about, or what do you do when you get over top the golf ball? And the gray shot routine, the gray zone is the post-shot routine. It's actually, what do you think about when the shot's over? How can this help you for the rest of the round? Okay. And we talk about this extensively in some of our, our training, our schools, our master classes, but we talk about this. It's just a small thing we talk about the mental game. But a big thing we do is we focus, and we need to focus on some mental training over the winter, so that when you're and it's not just mental training. People think when it's mental game training, it's about, okay, when I get in the golf course, I give myself the best chance to hit the best shot. Yes, that's part of it. But the other part of the mental game training is when you're out practicing, it gives you the best practice sessions possible. So if you're out practicing for 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, over a certain thing, good mental game training allows you to get the most out of that practice. That's also part of mental game training. What are you focusing on when you practice? That's part of helping it. And I would tell you, a great place to go is go to Graves Golf On Demand and look at our mental game masterclasses. We have actually a masterclass in there that we did last year in the mental game that is phenomenal, that we did with Paul Monahan. That's just amazing. I would suggest go look at that. Read books, look at something like that. Do mental game training, some type of work over the winter. That's huge. That's number one. Number two is you can do tons of short game training. You can get things like the Excalibur. It's one of our greatest training aids we have. You can do that over the winter. I would say right now, the biggest thing you can do, and I would strongly suggest this, is review the two birds with one stone training we've done with Graves Golf. Now, it may be something you've never seen. It may be something you've seen before, maybe something you saw last week, but it literally is short game training that shows you how working on your putting can help your full swing. It shows you how you have shaft lean with your putter, how you accelerate through the putter, how you keep that face square through the putter. That's just touching the tip of the iceberg. But that type of work will dramatically help your full swing work. Because here's what we see. We see the same faults in people's short game they have in the full swing, meaning you cast your putter, you flip the putter, you're going to cast your iron. You cast your iron, you cast your driver. You close up the face of the putter at setup, you're going to close up the face of your driver. You don't have shaft lean through impact, you're going to lose shaft lean through all the clubs. So believe it or not, working on your training inside, working on your chipping inside can dramatically and will dramatically improve your full swing, your full game, your long game. Okay, I promise you it will. We've seen this through years and years and years of teaching and training. So I would suggest do short game work. It may be something as simple as getting the Excalibur, throw it on the floor, throw a throw hole down there, see how many putts you can make over the winter. Maybe you can make 2 out of 10 right now. Maybe you want to make your goals 4 or 5 out of 10 before, the winter months are up. Okay. And figure out what's going on with that. Massive. That's huge. Okay. And then, so we've got mental game work. We've got short game work. And then probably the biggest out of the 3 that I said is flexibility and fitness training. Okay. And let's just throw this out into flexibility, because here's what happens. A majority of the golfers we deal with or we see need or have lost flexibility over time. I mean, because of their age, because of just their lifestyle, because of whatever. We sit behind a desk, we sit down where we don't move as much. And obviously anybody over 40 years of age, or even probably 35 years of age, has lost flexibility compared to when they were 25 or 30 years of age. Okay. We know that. And obviously a majority of our demographic are 50 years of age or older, and, and so on. In fact, probably a majority are 60 years of age or older. Okay. But what happens is, as you lose flexibility, or you don't have the flexibility you thought you had, or you think you're more flexible than you really are, you're unable to hit positions in the golf swing that we need to hit. Okay. And that is absolutely critical. And I'm going to bring up a couple examples of this. It might be flexibility in the hips. So you're not turning your hips back properly. So when you're trying to get the hip and shoulder turn in the backswing, you're not getting the proper turn that allows you to get the club on plane, to get the club with maximum, leverage at the top of the swing, speed, distance, and so on. So just losing hip flexibility, not only will it hurt your full swing, it'll hurt your pitching, it'll hurt your chipping, it'll hurt your bunker game. The only thing hip flexibility don't really need it in is putting, but every other part of the game, you need some hip flexibility. And what happens is, as you lose hip flexibility, we start doing things like extending. We have like early extension in the golf swing. We may not turn our hips back, and all of a sudden our shoulders are wide open at impact. It puts tons of stress in other areas of the body. Okay. So most of the time that we see injury or we see certain things occur in the swing, it's because of a lack of flexibility in other areas. Okay. So, and again, I can throw out 5 or 6 things that we typically see, but I would strongly suggest you either talk to somebody about getting more flexibility, like fitness and flexibility trainer, or if you want and you don't want to go see somebody, you can always go into on demand. And we have a flexibility and fitness training on there. Actually, we have a DVD on there on this topic. And what I did in this topic was I went, and this was a few years back, I went and became TPI certified. Okay. And what TPI is, it's basically it's the Titleist Performance Institute. But what it did was it allowed me to take the areas of the golf swing and hyper-focus them on the single plane swing. And then what I did is I took the 8 major areas, or the 8 major flexibility areas of the body, and said, okay, how flexible do we need to be to have a good single plane swing for a given individual? How flexible do we need to be in the hips? How flexible do we need to be in the torso? How flexible do we need to be in the wrists, in the elbows, in the shoulders, and so on? And I took those 8 major areas of the body, and I said, okay, now here's a test you can go do to see if you're flexible enough. And so I set it up where you could watch the DVD or watch the video, and you could sit there and say, okay, let me do this 90-90 test. And that's just shoulder and elbow flexibility. Let's do this wrist flexibility test. Let's do this hip flexibility test. Let's do this hamstring flexibility test, and it showed you a test to do. And if you passed it, great. If you didn't pass it, it gave you 3 or 4 exercises to do to work on increasing the flexibility in that area. Because I'll be honest with you, and I'm going to throw this out right now, and I'm going to pre-warn you of this, is Most people will not pass, a majority of them. In fact, when I give the test in person, most people, and I don't like to pass or fail in this, it's just I am flexible enough or I'm not flexible enough, because too many guys think pass or fail and they got to pass the test. That's not what this is about. This is about, are you flexible enough to not worry about that area? Okay. And most people are not flexible enough in 5 or 6 areas out of the 8. They may pass a couple of them. Okay. But most of them, they're not going to, which is okay. And then what you do is you start highlighting or hitting the areas that you have the least amount of flexibility in, because that will affect your golf swing the most. Okay. It's like, for example, we do the squat test where you put a club over your head and you put your arms above your head and you try to sit your back end down in the ground, or how low you can sit the back end down. And to pass the test, you should be able to get your back end or your butt basically almost touching the ground. Yes, it is a pretty tough flexibility test, but it's very critical. Well, most people, when I give them this test, they're lucky to be able to get their back end 90 degrees towards the ground. I mean, they can sort of sit down and then they're leaning forward and they can't do it. Well, their glutes are too tight. Their hamstrings are too tight. It's from sitting in a desk for too long or not getting enough flexibility, not enough flexibility work. Well, that same person, when he or she is swinging a golf club, they'll have early extension every single time. They'll take the club to the back of the swing. They start swinging down. Their back end will start pushing in towards the ball, and they'll lift up. So they lift up and out of the shot, and all of a sudden they're spinning out in the shot, and they're coming over top of it. They cannot keep their spine angle. They can't keep their shoulder tilt, or in particular their spine angle. They can't keep it through impact. They have what we call early extension. And here's the deal. That person, that golfer, can work on trying to not lose early extension, trying to stay with the proper spine tilt again and again and again and again. But until they work on some flexibility work, it's going to be, I'm not going to say a losing battle. It's going to be a battle that they're going to get frustrated with, because it's a flexibility issue. So notice, as I said this, the second I went into flexibility talk, it went right to the full swing. So notice why I said that. So everybody that freaked out when I said, if you worked on your short game, if you just worked on your mental game and you worked on flexibility work, you can significantly reduce your handicap. But that's all you did. Well, the reason I said that was because the flexibility work is directly related to the full swing. It'll give you the opportunity to then hit positions you've never hit in your swing, to hit certain areas you've never been able to master or to accomplish in your swing. That's what the flexibility work allows you to do. The problem is, majority of golfers never do this. They will just go struggle or fight it or whatever on the range and try to get better, but not understand that their body's not allowing them to do it. If I wish I could literally, and we've done this a little bit, but I wish I could show you facial responses of golfers, guys and ladies and gals and guys who literally have gone and done some flexibility work for a little bit of time. So, for example, and I'm going to back up half some of this, and I'm going to tell what I mean by this. We'll take a golfer and we'll give him a lesson. We may see him at school, may see him private lesson. And we'll have work on a certain area. Maybe it's trying to get leverage in their swing in the downswing. Maybe it's going from like position 2 to position 3. So I'm trying to increase leverage in that trail wrist. Okay. And then all of a sudden, that person will sit there and say, okay, and we'll give them a test of like the trail wrist test, a 90-90 test. And we'll realize, okay, they cannot move that trail wrist at all, or they have limited flexibility. So there's no way they can get that club in the proper plane with speed and distance, and they can't create leverage in the downswing. So we'll give that individual some exercises to do. And then all of a sudden, that person will go and do those exercises for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, whatever it is, and they'll come back and see us. And when they come back, the change in the expression from their swing previous to the swing now is just dramatic. Because what do? They didn't do full swing work. They did flexibility work. In fact, I can give you a quick story here. And this happened quite a few years ago. There was a gentleman, and he was an older gentleman. He's probably in his late 70s, maybe early 80s. And he came into our academy. This is the academy at Coffee Creek. In fact, I had my office. My office at Coffee Creek was right next to the hitting bay, and the place we're building again right now. But anyway, I was in there, and I was in my office, and I was working on something, and Todd was starting to give this lesson to this gentleman, and I could kind of overhear what was going on. And Todd was working with this gentleman, and all of a sudden, Todd comes to my door, opens my door, and he says, "Come out here for a second. Would you come out for a second?" I said, "Sure." And I walked out there, and he said, "Tim," he goes, "Look at this gentleman," and I'd just gone through the TPI training. That's why he got me. And he said, "Tim," he goes, "Look at this guy's wrist, his trail wrist." And I said, "Okay." And I looked at his trail wrist, and I said, try it. I said, put your arm up in the air, like put your elbow out 90 degrees. I said, take your right arm and lift it up in the air. Now try to bend your right wrist back, how far you can bend the right wrist back without moving your elbow forward, which is part of the 90-90 test. And the gentleman looked at me and goes, I can't move it back an inch. He goes, in fact, it's basically fused. He goes, I was injured when I was younger. And he goes, that was many, many years ago. And he goes, my trail wrist is flat. He goes, it's fused. He goes, I can't put it back 1 degree. And I said, that's an issue. And I looked at Todd, and Todd goes, yeah, that's a big issue. And I said, well, you haven't failed the test. You really didn't even take the test because you can't move your wrist back in a degree. Most people can go back 45, maybe 50 degrees. In fact, a lot of really good players can go back 65 to 70 degrees, if not more. This individual had basically 0 degrees. So Todd grabbed this individual and started working with him. And he basically told this individual, and this individual had driven down from Kansas. He basically told this individual, thank you for coming. But he said, there's very little I can do with getting your club on plane and getting you more distance than you've already got, because you're actually pretty good for that for no flexibility until you get some flexibility in that trail wrist. Okay. He goes, our lesson today is you've got to work on getting it. 1 degree is better than 0. 2 degrees is better than 1. You've got to get something, because that trail wrist flexibility will allow you to create leverage in the downswing. Will let you get that club on plane, will create speed and distance, get the club face on plane, the whole jazz. You've got to get some flexibility in that trail wrist to create those proper angles. Well, the gentleman left, and he came back about a month later. Okay. It was probably close to a month. And he came back in, and he grabbed me and Todd, and Todd was going to give him another lesson. He goes, first of all, I greatly appreciate that lesson, that you got this last lesson. And he goes, I want to tell you guys something. And he goes, I would bet that I've been over, and this is a quote from him. He goes, I would bet I've seen close to 1,000 different instructors. Now, that's probably exaggerated, but this is what he said. And he goes, here's the interesting thing. This was prior to seeing us. He goes, not one of them mentioned my trail wrist in previous instruction. And I've had this issue since I was very, very, very young. So basically, he had been fighting for years and years and years and years an issue with the trail wrist. And all his previous instructors had mentioned one thing about it. And it was like the first thing Todd picked up on. It was the first thing that we saw was, okay, you have lack of flexibility in this trail wrist. You have no flexibility in this trail wrist. That's a huge issue in your golf swing. Okay. Well, a couple of points to bring up there. Number one is, what were those other instructors looking at? Okay. I mean, they got to have a model to compare it to. I mean, we know we want to get a certain flexibility in that trail wrist to allow you to get the club on plane. Okay, that's number one. Number two is, without that flexibility, without that ability, he's always going to have compensations built in his swing. Always. So we have one or two ways we can go. We can either build a swing full of compensations, which we know what's going to happen with compensations. It's going to break down and fall apart, especially over time, under pressure, et cetera, et cetera. Or number two, we can sit there and say, okay, now let's go try to just gain a little more flexibility. You're never going to get to 60 or 70 degrees what we need, but just getting to 10, 15, 20 degrees is going to get that club on plane that much better and give you a better chance to get more speed, to get your club more consistent, et cetera, et cetera. That was the whole point of that. So you can go down you got a path. You can go down this path with this Y and this path. Number one is you can say, okay, I'm going to take the lack of flexibility I have right now and just go build compensations around it. Well, here's the problem. You're just going to get less and less flexible over time. So you're going to continually fight a battle of trying to come up with compensations for the lack of flexibility. Okay. Or number two, we can do some little flexibility and fitness work, which is, I'm not talking about going and spend hours in the gym, and becoming Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just going and gaining flexibility that's more than you had yesterday. So the flexibility work I'm talking about could be some yoga. I mean, so right now, all the guys are listening to this, you're rolling your eyes going, okay, my wife has been bugging me to take those yoga classes because of how good it is for you. Yeah, listen to her. It's great for you. Okay, it's phenomenal for you. Go take a yoga class. Go throw a yoga tape on TV and watch it. Go pull up something on online. Go search something. Any type of flexibility work will be great for you guys. But I would suggest hit the areas that you're the weakest at. And that's why I would say, pull out that flexibility exercise DVD, go through those tests, take you 10 minutes and see, okay, I got to go at this area. I will tell you right now, for most people, it's their hips. For most people, it's their hamstrings or their glutes. For most people, it's shoulder flexibility. For most people, it's wrist flexibility. Those are the areas. there's some issues about balance in there and things like that. Some guys pass those, some don't. But what I'm saying is find the area you're the weakest at. So think about it. So the winter training, and then I'll fall back on this. If right now, so, we're talking, we're early in the winter, or we're not even in the winter yet, we're in the fall and we're getting to the winter. If you just set up a system for yourself that revolves around, okay, let's do some indoor short game work. Let's focus on this. It's 50% of my scoring, if not closer, 75% of my scoring when the spring hits. So if I'm a better putter, if I chip a little bit better, and you guys can definitely work with that in the winter. If you just did that, start working that right now, and just worked on it a couple minutes inside during the week, that would be huge. You can call it the commercial practice during your football games. The commercials come on and you don't want to watch the commercial, grab a club and do some Excalibur work, okay, do some short game work. So you're working on 75% of your game, or at least 50% of your game. Number one, do some mental game work. So when you come out out of the winter, you're mentally stronger. You're mentally stronger on the golf course. Maybe you've created a pre-shot routine you want to try on the golf course. Now you're mentally stronger when you practice. You can focus better when you're inside of practice. You're getting more out of your practice sessions. That'd be huge. So when you actually go out and start hitting some balls in the spring, or you start spending some range time, or you start spending that time on the putting green, you're mentally stronger and you're getting more out of those practice sessions. That's massive, okay? And then the third thing is the flexibility part, because that is the full swing part. Yeah, so maybe you want to do a little full swing work inside. Maybe you want to get a single plane position train and do some work inside with that. Maybe you want to do some leverage bag work inside. There's a lot of things you can do inside. But you will gain better ability, or you'll have more ability to be able to hit positions you need to hit in the swing to have a good single plane swing. And then the worst thing of all, if you get more flexible, you're going to maintain or maybe increase some speed. Well, that'd be terrible, is to increase some speed and some distance over the winter. So that's what the really good players and the young players, the young guns will do, is they'll take this flexibility and fitness work and try to gain some speed over the winter. I'll tell you right now, most of our clientele aren't going to be gaining speed over the winter, but hopefully they can maintain the speed they had last year. If you could just maintain what you had and not lose a little bit every year, we'd be in good shape. Okay. So that's really what we want to do in that, and part of the reason I bring this up is that, I'm going to leave this here on this last thing, is that we are going to set up a program. We do it every winter. We've done this every winter, and I'll start presenting this to the members, but it'll be a single plane academy program. We're going to set this up. But the big thing in this thing is that I would also like to set up a program with the members out there that they can start sending them some video. Because guys, if you're doing drills over the winter, if you're doing flexibility and fitness work over the winter, if you're doing short game work in the winter, I would strongly suggest filming a little bit of it to make sure you're doing it right. Because there's other stories I've thrown out there, and I think I've probably thrown in the past podcasts, but there's other stories I've thrown out there where guys have done drills over the winter and they've actually, I'm not going to say they made themselves worse, which I kind of have, but they haven't gotten any better because they've done the drills wrong, or they haven't focused in the right areas and so on. So I would suggest if there's any way you can get some videos into our coaches, I would do that just to make sure you're on the right path. Because if you choose that right path, we want to stay on that path. Okay. And that's a big deal when you're doing it for 3, 4, 5 months in a row. Okay. So guys, again, I said that in one of the last webinars, and I wanted to bring it up in this little podcast that I do here. But when you start getting that fall and that flexibility work over the winter, or the training over the winter, focus on these 3 areas. Start putting a schedule out right now. Get some short game work. Let's get some mental game work. Let's get that fitness and flexibility go, which will allow you to get that full swing work going in. Okay, guys? Well, guys, let's get that set up, and I'm sure a couple more of this podcast come up soon. I'll talk more about this, and maybe give you some highlighted mental game work and maybe some highlighted fitness and flexibility work, but we'll talk some more about that. But thanks for joining me this week, and thanks for joining me in this podcast. And guys, we'll talk to you guys real soon.